In this session, we're going to talk about debt and borrowing. We've already looked at compounding, but that was in the context of where you've got an investment and you're adding to it every year with compound interest. Now we want to look at the opposite. What happens if you borrow money and how do you pay that money back? In order to do that, the best way is to look at an example so that you can really understand how debt works. Because if you don't, debt can really get away from you and cause all kinds of trouble. Like in our other spreadsheet on compounding, on the left side, we have our inputs. And the inputs here, there are three. The amount you're borrowing, I've put it in $10,000. The annual interest rate you're going to pay, I've put in 5%. And the number of years you're going to take to pay it back, and I've said 10. And what the spreadsheet is calculating for us is a couple of different things, but the first thing it's showing us in the green box is the amount you're going to pay per year. Now for simplicity, I have this set up so you're only paying once per year, one payment per year, not every month, which would be more typical in a lot of loans. But this shows you that if you were just paying this back in 10 equal installments, you would pay $1295.05 per year. And over here on the right, it shows you why. So let's take a look at that. What it shows you is your starting loan balance. We borrowed $10,000 in year one is obviously $10,000. And over the course of the year, we pay $1295. But that's broken up between an interest payment and a payment on the principal of the loan, the actual loan amount that we're paying down. We're paying $500 in interest and $795 in principal, which means that at the end of the first year, we haven't dropped our loan balance by $1295.05. We've only dropped our loan balance by the principal paid, which is $795. That interest just goes to the bank or to the lender. So our new loan balance is $9205. That's what we start our second year with as our initial loan balance for year two. And the table shows you the same thing happens again. We pay some interest and some principal. We drop our loan balance by the principal paid, and that becomes our loan balance in year three, and so on, until by year 10, our final balance is, of course, zero. Now, there's a couple things to notice about this, which you might not sort of jump out at you if you've never borrowed before for a home or for a car or looked at an amortization table. That's what this is. This is an amortization of your loan. It's breaking your loan into 10 pieces and dividing between interest and principal while keeping your annual payment the same, $1295 every year. And what you can see right off the bat is what's shown down here in this column graph, which is that although you're paying $1295 every year, and some is going to interest and some is going to principal, the ratio of interest to principal paid changes every year. And in a typical amortization table, you will pay more interest at the beginning and less principal. And as the loan goes on, your interest amount drops and the principal you're paying each year or each period goes up. And that's exactly what you see here. The blue bars here are the amount you're paying every year in interest, and the red bars are the amount you're paying back in the principal. And you can see at the beginning, you're paying only $500 of interest and $795 of principal, but by the end, your payment for year 10 is almost all principal, $1233, and you're just paying $62 in interest. First thing to realize, you're not paying equal amounts to interest and principal over the life of the loan. What you also can see is over here on the right are the totals paid. So after 10 years, you've paid back the $10,000 in principal. Of course, you had to, that's what you borrowed. But you've also paid a total of $2,950.46 of interest for a total of $12,950. That's the total you had to pay back that $10,000. And underneath there, what you see is the ratio in this donut graph of interest paid to principal paid. 77% went to principal, 22, 23% went to interest. Now, we can mess around a little bit with some of these variables. Again, we have the 3 variables over here, and what you'll see is a couple of important things. So for example, if we change the number of years, we keep still $10,000, still 5%, but we extend our loan out for 20 years instead of for 10 years. What happens? Well, first thing you'll notice is instead of paying $12.95 a month, we're only paying $802.43. Sorry, not a month, a year, per period, $802.43. So our yearly payment went down by over $400. That makes sense. We're paying it out over a much longer period of time. That means we have to pay less each period. That's nice. The other thing you'll notice, though, right away, if you come over here to totals, is that although, again, we've paid back $10,000 of principal, because that's what we borrowed, our interest, total interest paid over that 20 years, $6,048 for a total of over $16,000. And if you look at our donut graph, our ratio of total interest paid to principal paid went up. More interest. Last time it was 20-something%. Now it's up to 37% was paid in interest. The amortization column graph here is showing you a similar shape as before, although it's interesting to note at the beginning of this loan, you're actually in year 1 paying $500 of interest and only $302 of principal, more interest than principal. The shape of the two stays the same. You end up paying, by the end, more in principal, less in interest. But at the beginning, you're paying way more in interest. Okay, now this may say to you, well, I never want to have a long loan or an extended loan, and that's not necessarily the case. In a lot of home mortgages, for example, a very typical home mortgage is a 30-year mortgage. And the reason is, for most people, if you want to go out and buy a house, you need to borrow a lot to be able to do it, and you need a long time to pay it back. You couldn't pay it back very quickly, and so you extend it out, and you know in the end, if you do the math, that you're going to pay a lot in interest, but that's okay because you don't really have much choice and you want to buy the house. Now, the other thing to notice is the importance of the interest rate. So in this example, I'm going to take it back to 10 years for a minute instead of 20 years, back to our $12.95 a year. But instead of 5%, let's say this was a home mortgage loan, I'm going to make it 15%. Let's say it's a credit card loan. If you look at your credit card, you may be paying 15% or more in interest on an outstanding credit card balance, which is a good reason never to have an outstanding credit card balance. But let's put it in. What you're going to see at 15%, I'm going to take 10 years to pay that back. So let's say I borrowed $10,000 on my credit card and I paid it back every year. I didn't borrow any more. By the end, I will have paid the $10,000 in principal and $9,900 in interest. Our ratio is almost 50-50 interest to principal because that higher interest rate of 15% is really hurting us throughout the life of that loan. All of this just shows you, back to the power of compounding from the prior video, it shows you that it's really nice to be earning interest when you've done the lending, when you've put your money in the bank, for example. But it's painful to be paying interest on debt, particularly at an unfavorable interest rate. It also shows you the importance of time, again, just like we saw before, in paying back a loan like this. That's a quick introduction to debt. Hopefully now you understand some of the key terms you might hear when talking about debt, like amortization, principal, interest, the term of the loan, and you understand how certain things interact, like the interest rate and the number of periods that you use to pay the loan back. Finally, hopefully you can see how much that ratio between principal paid and interest paid can shift depending on the terms of the loan, and that can really make a big difference. Debt can be an amazing tool for managing your personal finance, for buying a house, for investing also. but it's important to have a good handle on how it works so that it doesn't get away from you.